Up next, Steph is here to break down some real-world attack life cycles and some Entra ID Tradecraft. Please give it up for Jingle Thief.
Okay, hi everyone, and thank you for joining me today. And congrats on making it to your last Troopers talk of the day, the last talk of Troopers26. So I'm Steph Setti, and today I'm telling the story about Jingle Thief, a campaign that I had the pleasure of investigating that we assess is linked to a threat actor called Atlas Lion. This is a threat actor known for large-scale gift card fraud. And we're going to look at the techniques that attackers used. We'll look at the activity that we observed from a defender's perspective and how we detected and investigated the campaign. Okay, let's play a quick game before we dive in. Let me start with a simple question. How would you detect an attacker if the user has already let them in? No exploit, no malware, just a legitimate login. That's exactly the challenge with Atlas Lion. They rely heavily on social engineering, and their phishing is so convincing that users effectively grant them access without even realize anything is wrong. So the real question that we're going to explore today is, how do you detect an attacker who looks exactly like a legitimate user? Before we begin, a bit about me. So I'm Stav. I'm based in Tel Aviv, Israel, and I'm on the UEBA and ITDR team at Palo Alto Networks, where we focus on detecting identity-based threats and suspicious user behavior. This talk is based on real attacker activity that we detected and investigated, and I'll walk you through what we saw firsthand. So today we'll be talking about Atlas Lion. Has anyone here heard of Atlas Lion? No? Okay, great. So Atlas Lion is a financially motivated threat group. They operate almost entirely in cloud environments, especially Microsoft 365. Their end goal is financial fraud, most commonly through gift card theft. But this is not smash and grab activity. They plan, they wait. They'll sit quietly inside your organization for months, learning how systems work before doing anything. And they'll succeed because everything they do looks normal. No exploits, no malware, just legitimate cloud and SaaS features used in the wrong way. From a research perspective, this is a low noise and a long-lived problem, and that's what we'll focus on today. Okay, so Atlas Lion has been active since around 2021, and they operate out of Morocco. They're not a nation-state actor, but they show a very high level of operational discipline. And they mainly target large retailers, but pretty much any company with systems that can issue or manage gift cards are at risk. To give you some scale, let's look at some Atlas Lion's past campaign impact. Over 200 phishing sites were tied to their infrastructure in a span of a year. At peak activity, Microsoft reported roughly $100,000 per day in stolen gift card value. And there was also a 30% surge in activity during high-traffic retail periods. Even the FBI has called out Atlas Lion for systematically targeting gift card departments at major US retailers. So as you can see, this is not some sort of theoretical threat. It's a measurable financial drain on the retail sector. All right, let's zoom in into one case we saw. In a large global retailer, Atlas Lion maintained access for over 10 months. During that time, more than 60 user accounts were compromised across 4 Microsoft 365 services. These numbers are shocking, but what's just as important is when it happened. Most of the activity occurred during holiday periods when organizations are busiest, staffing is thin, and temporary employees are common. Temporary users are especially challenging from a detection perspective. Why? Well, they're new, so they don't have an established baseline. So you don't really know what normal looks like for them. And it's not just about the users, it's also the environment. During holidays, gift card spikes massively. Legitimate issuance volumes goes up through the roof, and fraudulent transactions will blend right in. And SOC teams, they're also dealing with higher alert volumes and slower response times. Atlas Lion knows all of this, and they take advantage of it. So at first we asked ourselves, why gift cards? They're not exactly Bitcoin, but when you dig in, it turns out to be very solid criminal economics. Gift cards are essentially digital cash with very limited visibility. They're easy to redeem and resell. They're hard to trace, and they usually require very little identity verification. And many organizations, gift cards are also managed through systems with weaker access controls and limited logging. In retail environments, issuing gift cards is also part of normal day-to-day work. And that's the most important part here. The most important part is the permissions model. Many employees can issue gift cards, and they do it constantly. Okay. So before we go further, let's be clear about what actually happens to the gift cards. And the flow is very simple. First, attackers gain access to the internal gift card system through a compromised account. Next, they issue the gift cards using the exact same workflows that employees use. In many cases, these can be for very large amounts, say tens of thousands of dollars per card. And finally, they monetize them by selling the cards, often through underground markets. So the gift card itself isn't really the goal. It's how identity access gets turned into money. Here's their playbook at a glance, and we'll go deeper into each stage in a moment. The stages themselves are familiar, right? What's different is how they move through them. Every step here relies on valid credentials and legitimate cloud behavior. Again, there's no malware, no exploits. Everything happens inside the identity layer. Okay, so now we're going to walk through the campaign step by step, and we'll start with Reconnaissance. All right, I have a small challenge for you. On the right side of the slide, you'll see a Palo Alto Networks login page. Is it real or fake? Raise your hand if you think it's real. Fake? It's kind of hard to tell, right? And that's exactly what Atlas Line is counting on. What makes Atlas Line so effective is their level of precision. They replicate branding almost pixel for pixel, logos, colors, layout. Everything looks legitimate, and that's why these lures work, even against security-aware users like me and you. So eventually, Reconnaissance turns into opportunity. Let's look at how they actually gain access. All right, so how does Atlas Line actually get in? They mainly rely on phishing, both SMS and email. First, smishing. They'll send short, urgent text messages, things like a fake Microsoft support alert asking you to verify your account. Because it's on mobile, it looks simple and legitimate, and people are more likely to click. Then there's email phishing. They're going to use adversary in the middle phishing kits. Basically, phishing pages that act as a live proxy between the user and the real login service. So when the victim logs in, everything looks normal. They enter their credentials, they complete MFA, nothing seems suspicious. But in the background, the attacker is relaying that entire session in real time and capturing it. So they don't need to break MFA. They just let the user complete it. And at the end of that flow, the attacker gets a valid session token, which lets them access the account as if they're the legitimate user. All right, one of the first things that we noticed was a large-scale phishing campaign coming from an external domain, deskplug.ar. The lure was simple but effective. ServiceNow account and activity notice. If your organization uses ServiceNow, this immediately feels legitimate, and that's the point. They're not guessing. They're aligning the lure to tools that the company actually uses. And this campaign was sent broadly across the organization, as you can see by the recipient count, because at the end of the day, they don't need everyone to click. They just need one user, one set of credentials, one valid session, and that's enough to get a foothold. during the initial investigation, we found something interesting in the email headers. So challenge for you, look closely here. Does anything look suspicious? If you guessed XPHP script header, then you're right. This is actually how we uncovered our attacker's infrastructure. The XPHP script header indicates the server-side script responsible for sending the message. In this case, it pointed to a specific path on the server, an index.php file under an attacker-controlled domain. That tells us that this wasn't a standard mail service. They were using a custom PHP mailer as part of their infrastructure. And what you're seeing here in this screenshot is an example of that. This is the actual system that they use to send these phishing emails. And as we dug deeper, we found some other interesting things. The phishing wasn't coming from a single server. It was a distributed setup. A network of self-hosted PHP mailers running on compromised WordPress sites. From one of these servers, we were actually able to recover the send logs. And these logs showed us clear evidence of phishing activity. They were using an email to SMS technique. You might be familiar with it. You can send a message to an address like phone number at vtext.com, and that'll route emails directly to Verizon devices as text messages. So that's how they bridge email infrastructure to SMS delivery. Another interesting detail, the originating IPs we saw were consistently based in Morocco. And when you step back, this setup makes a lot of sense. It's cheap, scalable, it's hard to track. They can control sending volume, they can rotate their infrastructure, and most importantly, they can hide behind legitimate but compromised websites. All right, with that, we're going to move into discovery and collection. So once they have access, you would think that, okay, now they can go steal gift cards. But they don't rush at all. They don't immediately start cashing out. Instead, the first thing they'll do is start learning. What we saw was in the SaaS logs of SharePoint OneDrive, we saw a lot of searches. And those searches tell a story. Remember, their goal is gift card fraud. So they're looking for anything that could help them get them there, right? How to access the gift card system, how to issue cards, internal procedures, training documents. But beyond just gift cards, they're also gathering broader knowledge. How to access the VPN of the company, VPN guides, MFA instructions, internal workflows. So they're not just inside the environment, they're building an operational playbook using the company's own documentation. Here are some real examples of what they actually search for. You can see queries for VPN documentation, gift card procedures, and remote access guides. So this isn't random exploration. It's very targeted. They're using the organization's own internal documentation to figure out how things work and effectively building an operational playbook from it. We also saw a spike in email access across the compromised accounts. In Exchange logs, this shows up as mail items access activity. Basically, the attacker is opening and reading large volumes of emails. And this was coming from IP ranges associated with Moroccan ASNs. So this is far beyond normal user behavior. It's not us casually checking our inboxes. It's systematic data collection. Okay, so at this point, they've gathered information. The next step is to make sure they continue receiving it. So from here, we get to one of the most important techniques, inbox rules, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Inbox rules are completely legitimate features used for automation. For example, you can create a rule that moves emails from your manager to a separate folder. But attackers, they use the same feature very differently. They use inbox rules to hide alerts, to exfiltrate emails, and to monitor ongoing communication. So instead of disrupting the user, they stay under the radar. Pretty much this is one of the features that's great for us users, but even better for attackers. So what did they actually do with these rules? they created rules that forwarded emails to their attacker-controlled address. That meant that they got a copy of sensitive communications in real time without needing to stay logged in. So even if the session is revoked or the password is reset, they still have visibility into what's happening. This is something that we see in almost every BEC, business email compromise style attack nowadays. It's one of the most common and one of the most effective ways that attackers maintain access. All right, so now at this point, we might have one compromised account, and that's great. But 10 compromised accounts are much better. So naturally, the next step is lateral movement. And let's take a look now at how Atlas Line moved through the organization. Once they compromised one account, they shifted to, you guessed it, internal phishing. Internal phishing, why is it effective? Well, the emails come from a trusted colleague, a real user inside the organization whose account has already been compromised. That means that A, the messages will naturally bypass a lot of your spam filters and your security controls, but most importantly, they inherit trust. From the recipient's perspective, nothing really looks that suspicious. It's just another internal email, and that's exactly what Atlas Line relies on. So by now, the attacker is phishing internally and compromising additional users, and that creates a problem. More activity creates more evidence. So the next phase is, how do we make that evidence disappear? So what we saw was emails being deleted from the sent items folder and moved into deleted items. And when we looked at the subject lines, it all stood out and made a lot of sense. These are the same themes that we saw earlier: ServiceNow notifications, incident requests, and other internal-looking alerts. So this wasn't random cleanup. It's a deliberate effort to reduce visibility and avoid raising suspicion while the campaign is still going on. Emails are also deleted from the recipient's inbox. So from the outside, it looks like nothing ever happened. No phishing email in the inbox, no sent message in the outbox. The Atlas Line effectively erased both sides of the conversation, the sender and the recipient, leaving almost no visible trace in the mailbox itself. Here are a few more examples. Here you can see an email with the subject line, re-phishing attempt, that was deleted. And that's interesting because it suggests that they were already alerted of phishing at some point, but instead of letting that visibility remain, it was removed. So the attacker isn't just deleting individual messages, they're actively suppressing anything that could alert the user that something is wrong. All right, so that's defense evasion. But at some point, attackers have to assume that at some point access will be lost, right? Passwords get reset, sessions get revoked. So now the question becomes, how do you actually stay in? All right, so here's where things get more advanced and more persistent. This isn't just about gaining access once, it's about staying in quietly and for a long time. And this is something that Atlas Line, wow, they're amazing at this. They abuse native identity managed features and Entra ID to maintain persistence. For example, they'll register their own authenticator apps and devices inside the tenant. And that means, hey, if passwords are reset or credentials are revoked, they can still re-authenticate as a trusted identity as if nothing changed. This makes remediation much harder than expected. In some cases we saw, it took months to fully remove all persistence mechanisms. And from a defender's perspective, it feels like a game of whack-a-mole, right? Like you remove one access path and another one appears. Okay, this brings us to the last phase, privilege escalation. How did they escalate beyond what they were supposed to have? And in this case, the attacker leveraged ServiceNow to request additional privileges. And to the IT teams reviewing requests, everything looked routine. I mean, I use ServiceNow all the time to get more permissions. So nothing stood out as malicious or unusual. And that's kind of the key point here. The attacker was fully embedded into normal business workflows, using the same processes that legitimate users use every single day. Okay, That's the Alice Line playbook. That's it. No malware, no exploits, no 0 days, just identity. Every step we walked through looked like normal business activity, did it not? So the question is, if everything appears legitimate, how do you actually detect it? All right, now for the fun part. We're going to switch perspectives. Up until now, we've been talking about the campaign through the attacker's eyes, and now let's look at it from a defender's perspective. Okay, so challenge for you guys now to think like a researcher. I want to start with a concrete detection example, inbox forwarding rules. And what I want to show you here is not the exact query or a final alert, but it's just kind of the logic behind how we approach detection. The first step is narrowing the problem space. And we'll start with a simple question. Show me all inbox forwarding rules. To answer that, we go to Exchange audit logs and focus on operations that create or modify inbox rules across the different Exchange APIs. The key point here, this logic is not an alert, it's a filter. It answers one very specific question. Show me all inbox forwarding rules. But what would happen if we tried to turn this into alert? Well, obviously it would fail. The signal is simply too noisy. So this is the starting point, not the detection. Okay, so now that we have the full set of inbox forwarding rules, the next step is understanding what normal looks like. This is where behavioral analysis comes in. At the start of this, I ask you to how you would detect an attacker who looks like a legitimate user. This right here is the answer. Instead of asking, is this bad, is this malicious, we'll start with a different question. Is this expected for this environment? And to answer that, we build basic, simple behavioral baselines. For example, user frequency. How often does this user normally create forwarding rules? Is it something they do regularly or never? Then, target scope. Is this account acting only on its own mailbox, or is it touching other users' mailboxes too? Then, domain history. Has this forwarding destination been seen before in the organization? And finally, domain type. Is it going to a public email provider like Gmail or Yahoo? In this campaign, we saw that it actually went out to a Gmail address. So these are important questions, but each of these dimensions help us separate normal from suspicious. But the key principle here is that no single dimension is enough. It's the combination of all these things that create high confidence detections. Okay, once we understand what normal looks like, we can start layering in stronger identifiers. And these aren't signatures on their own, they're confidence boosters. One example is rule content. We'll look at what the forwarding rule is actually trying to capture. Keywords like password, bank, invoice, wire transfer are strong indicators of malicious intent in the context of forwarding rules. Another signal is domain length. Very long domains, often over 25 characters, are a common pattern that we see in attacker infrastructure. Legitimate domains tend to be shorter and more recognizable. All right, these are some other things that we would alert on based on the Jingle Thief campaign. And what you're looking at here isn't a single alert. It's a case that aggregates multiple alerts. Things like first access from a new country, suspicious ASNs, inbox forwarding rules, suspicious theme in email. And each alert on its own might not be enough, but together they tell a clear story of a compromised user. So that was detection, which for me is the fun part, and I could talk about this for another hour. But we are running out of time, so we'll take a quick look at attribution. All right, one of the questions that we often get is, how did we know it was Atlas Line? And we won't go super deep into attribution here, but I can share a few indicators. Something that was very surprising is that most of the logins we observed came directly from Morocco. In some cases, they did use US-based proxies, but the vast majority of activity originated straight from Morocco. That was very surprising because they didn't really even try to hide it. And that tells us something important about their level of confidence. We also looked at the phishing infrastructure itself. Many of the phishing URLs were hosted on legitimate compromised websites, often WordPress. A common trick that we saw, which I find very interesting, is using the @ notation in URLs to appear more legitimate, knowing that the browser ignores everything before it. So for example, troopers.com @ malicious site. You see the troopers.com, the brand name, and think, hey, that's legitimate. But the browser will actually navigate to everything after the @ to the malicious site. And on the attribution side, the campaign used patterns like /workspace and /home, and those are pretty consistent with Alice line. All right, key takeaways. So I'll leave you with the same question that we started with. How do you detect an attacker that looks like a legitimate user? I think that this campaign gives us the answer. And I think it's a very great example of why ITDR and identity is a new perimeter, because without behavior, you can't detect any of this. Okay, we call this campaign Jingle Thief. Jingle because of the holiday season timing, and Thief because of the gift card fraud. If you want to dive deeper, we published a full write-up on the Unit 42 blog post under the same name, Jingle Thief. Everything we talked about today is covered there in more detail. That's all. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
I think we have time for one question. So, are there any?
Great talk. Did you try to contact the local Moroccan police and involve them in the investigation, maybe?
We did not contact the local Moroccan police. No, we did not do that. No, we're mostly focused on the detection elements behind this, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then
Thank you.
Thanks again, Steph.
Thank you.